should work. So, yeah. Hi again.
Hey,
You're CEO of Kabojo?
I am. I am.
Yeah.
I am the
So,
CEO of Kubojo. My name's Mario.
okay. Just to start, maybe you could introduce yourself. What's Kabojo, or what are you currently working on?
Sure, of course. So I'm Mario. I'm CEO of Kubojo. I've been working, I guess, in the games industry for about 15 years, primarily as a game designer, producer of mostly RPG games, primarily MMOs. So I started at Sony Online. I've worked at EA, Ubisoft, most of the big companies. And Kubojo is a French startup that I took over a little bit over 2 years ago. And the idea was we wanted the company to become a leader in the creation of RPGs. So right now we're working on two games. One game that's unannounced, that's being developed in our Paris studio. And today I'm speaking to you from our newly opened UK studio, which has been developing kind of our new flagship game, Zodiac. Zodiac is Orcanon Odyssey is a Japanese RPG that's designed for the Japanese and the Western market. And it's a first time collaboration between Kazuhiki Nojima, Nojima-san, who is the writer of Final Fantasies 7, Kingdom Hearts. He's writing 15 right now. And also between Hitoshi Sakimoto, who's a composer and owner of Bass Escape. He also has done the soundtracks for games like Odin Sphere, Miramus of the Demon Blade, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy 12. So that's basically it.
Okay. So we already got the chance to play the game, and we wrote a preview about it. Just a quick question we got from fans. Could you go deeper into the details for gameplay? How's the path you choose in the game, or could you give us details about the gameplay?
Sure. I mean, what kind of details? Like, I can't reveal everything about the story because obviously it's like a very detailed Japanese RPG story. So it was created by I guess Kazuhiki Nojima-san. Just it took him about 5 or 6 months. It's something like 30,000 lines of dialogue, over 47 different cutscenes. So it's a pretty big story. The game takes place in a new world that we've created called Orcanon. That's why it's called the Orcanon Odyssey. So in the story, you play the main character, Kyle, who is trying to kind of rediscover a lost mystery in the world that has kind of hidden the past from some of the different groups there. So in the tutorial, we take you through, and the game, if you're talking mechanically about how the game plays, it has two kind of core loops. The game is an exploration-based RPG, very similar to like Dragon's Crown or things like this. And then the battle system is a turn-based battle system, meaning like traditional JRPGs. So the way it works, I guess, with that is you can play kind of asynchronously or synchronously with your friends, and also you have the party members. So it's a party of 3 people, usually in the battle system, and what you're discovering is kind of the history and secrets of the world, and also you're unlocking each of the 12 zodiac sign classes in the game. So part of the game is also how you balance and rotate through using classes to defeat different bosses, different enemies, how to go through different encounters. And the game uses an element-based system, earth, air, water, fire. And based on what you and your friends use in battle, of course, some battles will be skewed and more difficult. So, for instance, if I have a fire creature and I'm fighting a fire boss, then bringing my friend who has a water sign job would be probably more useful than me going through with a fire job. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that the detail you think they want?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And what's the main thing you're trying to achieve with the game? Like, what's the main difference to other JRPGs? Or
Oh, I think first we want to be the first Western studio to create a JRPG for the Japanese market, right? A lot of times you'll see there are some Western studios that have tried to take kind of the formula of JRPGs, but what we want is a Japanese art style, a Japanese story, a game that's accepted in Japan. So we want a game that performs like Bravely Default or one of these other games. The goal was to create the highest quality Japanese RPG on mobile touch devices, which is why we focused on creating the game on iOS and also on PS Vita.
Do you got some new details on the save games, like when you play on your Vita and PS4 transition, or when you play on your smartphone and you want to transfer the save games to another console?
That's a good question. Truthfully, I know that I think when we discussed it a bit, I told you there's no technical limitations. I don't know the business limitations, right? So what I mean is that we store all your character data in databases on a server. So from Kobojo's perspective, it doesn't matter if you play on a Vita, a PC, a PS4, whatever. But of course, maybe it matters to Sony or it matters to Valve or who knows. So the only restriction to not being able to coexist in those two worlds and play together, I think, is going to not be technical. It's going to be business restrictions.
Okay.
And of course, I can't speak for those companies about what they will and will not allow, right?
So, how's it working with like a developer who was into Final Fantasy VII or Kingdom Hearts? I mean, how's the work with the developers, or?
It's pretty intense. I mean, I have so we work in Japanese, right? So I have of course, there are some people on our team who speak Japanese, but then I also have full-time translators, so they work directly with me. So I will send an email. Usually, first I send it in English, and then the translator translates it, let's say, 20 minutes later or something, and then so they'll see the English version, then they'll get it in Japanese, then they'll write me back in Japanese, and then their translator will translate it into English, and usually, so it's time consuming. We also work via Skype and things like this when we want to have meetings, and we fly out there quite a bit. Like I'll be in Japan beginning of August for my next meeting with them to review the game, to discuss things. So I think overall it's pretty good. They're very open, and I think there hasn't been many problems that I wouldn't say are like normal development problems when you have distance, So it's been a very good collaboration. I think with the story, it was a bit trickier because the story Nojima-san wrote, we kind of gave him an outline, then he wrote a story. Then we got the story, and the story is like I told you, it's like 30,000 lines of dialogue. So then first you have to translate it, you have to localize it into English. Then after you have it in English, you need a very special writer that knows Japanese and English or knows JRPGs, and then they can because the translation, it's like rough, it's just, it doesn't have all of his meaning, all of the depth of the characters. So then now we have one external writer and two in-house, all English speakers but no Japanese, who just take his lines of dialogue, rewrite the story, make sure, because it doesn't do me much good to work with him if we don't capture the essence of what he was trying to say, right, in Japanese. So that's trickier. But as far as the rest of the work, audio or art or things like this, it's pretty, we'll send a build and we'll say, okay, we need scary music for this dungeon. And then Sakimoto-san and them will send through some samples, we'll approve. And then, same thing with when we're doing some art, like the cutscenes, we send a brief. The guys in Kyoto look at the brief, they get back to us with a storyboard and a rough. We agree on it, and then it usually takes them about 3 to 4 weeks to do one cutscene, I would say.
Okay. And about showing the game to people, like with betas or events, do you got any new plans? Like you got the Gamescom in Cologne in August. Are you there, or to showing the game, or?
I don't know, honestly. I think maybe not, because we are in Tokyo in September, right?
Oh, okay.
So then going to Gamescom and then go to Tokyo, we can't have the team make 100 demos, right? So I think probably the next time we'll show the game is Tokyo Game Show.
Okay. And how's it going with the beta? Do you got new plans on the or open beta or something like that?
No, I think the game's going pretty well right now, and I think probably in the next month or so, we'll be able to announce like a final release date for the game. It'll definitely be this year, but we've just been testing some things internally to make sure that we're right. But I think in the next month, we'll be able to say, okay, the date is this. Of course, we have to confirm it with all our partners and stuff, the
Yeah.
guys who we're launching the game with, right?
So do you plan on just a digital release, or are there going to be a boxed version or collector's edition or something like that?
Right now, there's only planned to be a digital release. There is discussion of a digital collector's edition where people can get the music and get some of the background info, some special pieces of art, things like this. So we're in discussion. Of course, that has to be discussed with Apple and people like this. But I think it'll probably be some sort of digital collector's edition.
Okay. Maybe like you could sell or the artwork, because the artworks are really looking good in the background. Or
I mean, sure, we'd like to. The problem is because we're like a digital company, we don't really have any. The only way for me to like do something like that, I think, would be to like sign a deal with a publisher, right? Like sign a deal with EA or Ubisoft or somebody who has distribution. I don't have any distribution at like Walmart or any place else, right, where we could sell the posters and stuff.
okay. And just a last question. What do you think should people most looking forward when in points of Zodiac of the release, or what's so special about the game, or what's your personal favorite point of the game, or
Sure. I mean, for me, it's a unique story in a unique world. So I think it will appeal to people who, if you really like Final Fantasy VII, you've enjoyed the tactical combat of Final Fantasy XII. Those were kind of the targets we wanted. We wanted to work with the guys who had created the Final Fantasy universe and create a different universe, a new story with new characters in a new world. So a completely new experience, a new IP. The game will run for several years, so we'll be adding to that story constantly. So I think the new thing about it is pretend like you could play Final Fantasy VII, but over the next 3 years, not in 40 hours or something like that. Pretend like every few months they added a new chapter, or they added a new dungeon, or they added a new place to go in the story. We have a rolling contract with the guys in Japan, and so we plan to work with them through the live versions of the game. I think that's what's different. It's like a game as a service, but it's not like an MMO. So it's not like it's everybody's story. Your story is still quite personal. So that's, I think, to me, how it's very different.
I think the biggest problem about mobile games or smartphone games is they get pretty quick repetitive. So what are your plans with Zodiac? Are you planning to, like you said, add more story after you finish it with about some hours, or?
Oh yeah, we have enough story, I think, to last through the end of 2016 right now.
Okay.
With like updates coming every couple of months kind of thing. And the updates would be big. When I talk about updates, they're not like we're adding a dungeon. It's like we're adding cutscenes, we're adding classes, we're adding, it's pretty big updates. So it takes us, that's why we don't do them every week, because it's not like a typical free-to-play game where I'm putting like new weapons or whatever. Of course you get those too, but like, to build a dungeon like what you saw in our game, it probably takes about a month. And then you build cutscenes. That's usually a month. So I'm going to say probably bi-monthly is safe. Like every couple months is probably when a big new update will come out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks for the interview.
No problem. No problem. If you have any other questions, you know where to find me.